In 2001, researchers at MIT auctioned off tickets to a sold-out basketball game. Half the bidders could only pay cash. The other half could only use a credit card. The credit card bidders paid on average twice as much for the same tickets. The same experiment has been replicated dozens of times across different products and different countries. Every time, the result is the same. Paying with a card produces higher spending than paying with cash. And the financial industry has known about this finding for decades. They built their products around it. In 2001, two researchers at the MIT Sloan School of Management ran an experiment that has since become one of the most cited findings in behavioral economics. They auctioned pairs of tickets to sold-out basketball games. Real games, real tickets, real money. Half the participants in the auction were randomly assigned to pay with cash if they won. The other half were told they could only pay by credit card. Everything else was identical. The researchers found that credit card bidders bid, on average, twice as much as cash bidders for the same tickets. Not 10% more, not 20% more, twice as much, for the exact same product. The researchers attributed the finding to what they called the coupling of spending and payment, the degree to which the act of paying feels connected to the act of receiving the item. With cash, the connection is tight and physical. You hand over something you can see, count, and feel the absence of. With a credit card, the coupling is loose. The payment is deferred, abstract, and painless at the moment of transaction. That looseness, the researchers argued, reduces what they called the pain of paying, and a reduced pain of paying means a higher willingness to spend. This finding is not a quirk of basketball tickets or MIT students. It has been replicated in grocery stores, restaurants, vending machines, charity donations, tipping behavior, and online purchases across multiple countries and demographic groups. The direction of the effect is consistent. Card payment produces higher spending than cash payment for equivalent purchases across virtually every context researchers have studied. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly why this happens at the neurological level, how the financial industry engineered its products around this knowledge, and what the rise of contactless and digital payment has done to the size of the spending gap. Let us start with what is actually happening in your brain. To understand why card payment produces higher spending, you need to understand the neurological mechanism the MIT researchers identified, the pain of paying. Paying for something produces a measurable negative response in the brain. When you part with money, particularly physical money you can see and touch, neuroimaging studies have shown activation in the insula, a region of the brain associated with the processing of pain and negative emotions. This response is not metaphorical. Spending money genuinely triggers a mild version of the same neural circuitry activated by physical discomfort. The pain of paying functions as a natural braking mechanism on spending. Each purchase triggers a small, but real aversive signal that your brain weighs against the anticipated pleasure of the item being purchased. This braking mechanism operates differently depending on how payment is made. Cash activates it most strongly. The physical transfer of counted bills produces a vivid, immediate, and salient experience of loss. Credit cards reduce the activation significantly. Payment is deferred to a future billing cycle. The transaction requires no physical transfer of scarce resources, and the pain is distributed across a future time period rather than experienced as a concentrated loss at the moment of purchase. Debit cards fall somewhere between the two, producing more spending friction than credit cards, but less than cash. Now here is the detail that makes this commercially significant. The degree to which the pain of paying is suppressed by a payment method is directly proportional to how much more the user spends compared to a cash equivalent transaction. This is not a minor rounding error. Across the body of research, the spending premium associated with card payment over cash payment is typically in the range of 12 to 18% for debit cards and significantly higher for credit cards in contexts where the deferred billing effect is pronounced. Think about what that means for your annual spending. If your household spends $40,000 per year on purchases, and the card payment premium over cash is conservatively 15%, the payment method alone is associated with approximately $6,000 in additional annual spending compared to what the same household would spend making equivalent purchases with cash. $6,000. From the mechanics of how the payment feels, not from different products, not from different needs, not from different income. from the neurological difference between handing over a bill and tapping a card. The pain of payment research has been published in peer-reviewed journals since the early 2000s. The financial industry's access to this research predates most consumers' awareness of it by decades. And the design evolution of payment products over the same period tells a very specific story about what the industry did with what it learned. Now let us trace what the financial industry did with the pain of payment research, because the design evolution of payment products over the past 3 decades is a direct response to these findings, whether or not the industry explicitly acknowledges that connection. The credit card itself reduced payment pain compared to cash by introducing deferred billing. You spend now. The pain of the statement arrives later, separated from the pleasure of the purchase by days or weeks. But the early credit card still required a signature, a physical card present at the transaction, and some minimal engagement with the payment act. Each of those friction points was a mild pain signal. The magnetic stripe and PIN debit cards simplified the transaction but retained the PIN entry as a friction point, a small cognitive engagement that kept the payment act somewhat salient. Research comparing PIN debit to signature debit found that PIN transactions produced slightly less overspending, attributed to the additional cognitive engagement of entering the PIN number, keeping the payment more mentally present. The signature debit card eliminated the PIN, reducing the friction to a card swipe and a signature, which most people complete on autopilot after thousands of repetitions. Then the contactless card eliminated the signature, reducing the entire payment act to a single tap lasting less than a second. The Apple Pay and Google Pay iterations eliminated even the physical card. A wrist tap or a face scan replaced everything that had come before. At each step of this design evolution, payment friction was reduced. At each step, the pain of paying signal was further suppressed. At each step, the spending premium associated with the payment method increased. This is not a conspiracy. It is a rational commercial response to documented consumer behavior. Payment companies profit from transaction volume. Higher transaction values mean higher fees. A payment technology that produces higher spending per transaction is a more commercially valuable payment technology. The design improvement and the commercial incentive pointed in exactly the same direction, and they reinforced each other at every iteration. Now add the loyalty rewards layer. We covered loyalty programs in the subscription video on this channel, but their role in the payment pain mechanism is worth addressing specifically. A rewards card does not just reduce the pain of paying by eliminating physical currency transfer. It inverts the signal entirely. Instead of a mild aversive response when you spend, a rewards card gives you a mild positive signal. You are earning points. You are getting cash back. The purchase is not a loss. It is an accumulation. The psychological framing is completely inverted from the cash experience, and the spending behavior reflects that inversion. Studies comparing rewards card spending to non-rewards card spending and to cash spending find a consistent hierarchy. Cash produces the lowest spending, non-rewards cards produce more, and rewards cards produce the highest spending of all 3 categories, even controlling for income and demographic differences. The payment industry did not stumble into this outcome. The rewards program design, the contactless tap design, the stored card-on-file design for online purchases. Each of these features addresses the pain of paying from a different angle, with the same commercial objective: reduce the friction between the desire to purchase and the completion of the transaction. If understanding why your card spending is consistently higher than your cash spending just explains something you have noticed, but never had words for, stay with me. Because the original pain of payment research and the industry's design response to it are only 2 layers of this. What the rise of contactless payment, buy now pay later, and stored digital wallets has done to the size of the spending gap in the past 5 years, that is what comes next. And the numbers are significant. The original pain of payment research was conducted in an era when the dominant card payment method was a swipe and a signature. Contactless payment was not yet mainstream. Buy now pay later did not exist as a consumer product. Stored card on file for online purchases was in its infancy. The spending premiums identified in that research, 12 to 18% for debit cards, higher for credit cards, were measured against a payment friction environment that by current standards looks relatively high. What happened to the spending gap as friction continued to fall is documented in more recent research. Studies on contactless payment adoption in markets where it was introduced, including the United Kingdom, Australia, and Canada, where contactless became mainstream earlier than the United States, consistently found that contactless payment produced higher per-transaction spending than the chip-in-pin method it replaced, even controlling for the transaction categories where contactless was used. The one-tap experience suppressed the pain of paying beyond what even the signature swipe card had achieved. Buy now, pay later products. Services that split a purchase into 4 equal installments with 0 interest if paid on time represent arguably the most aggressive application of the pain of paying research to date. By breaking a single payment into 4 smaller future payments, BNPL products do 2 things simultaneously. They reduce the immediate pain signal to 1/4 of the full purchase amount, because only the first installment feels immediately real. And they make larger purchases feel affordable by framing them in terms of a small initial payment rather than the full price. Research on BNPL usage consistently finds that consumers spend more per transaction when BNPL is available than when it is not, often significantly more, and that a meaningful portion of BNPL users report purchasing items they would not have bought at the full price point. Stored card on file for online purchases, where your payment details are already saved and a purchase requires only a single click or a fingerprint, has produced similar findings. One-click purchasing removes the final remaining friction from digital commerce, the act of retrieving a card, entering numbers, and confirming billing details. Research on one-click versus multi-step checkout found measurably higher completion rates and higher average order values for one-click, attributed to the reduced cognitive engagement required to complete the payment. Drop in the comments which payment method you find yourself spending most freely with: cash, card, contactless tap, or BNPL. I want to know if what you notice in your own behavior matches what the research consistently finds. Because most people have noticed the pattern. Most people have never had the science to explain it. Here is what understanding the pain of payment research actually changes about how you manage your spending. The goal is not to go back to cash for everything. That is impractical in a world where most commerce is digital and contactless. The goal is to strategically reintroduce payment friction where you are most likely to overspend, and to use the science deliberately rather than be used by it unconsciously. The first application is budget category cash envelopes for your highest overspending categories. Research and personal finance practitioners have documented consistently that people who use physical cash for categories where they habitually overspend, dining, entertainment, impulse purchases, reduce their spending in those categories. You do not need to use cash for everything. You need to use it where the pain of payment breaking mechanism is most valuable to you. Identify your 2 or 3 categories of consistent overspend. Withdraw the budgeted cash for those categories at the start of each month. When the envelope is empty, the category is closed. The second application is adding deliberate friction to your highest risk digital spending. Remove stored card on file from your highest impulse online shopping accounts. Require manual card entry for those purchases. The additional 30 seconds of friction produces a measurably lower completion rate for impulse purchases, because the pain signal has time to register before the transaction completes. The third application is treating BNPL as a full-price purchase decision. Before using any BNPL option, write out the full price of the item, not the installment amount, the full price. Evaluate the purchase at the full price the same way you would evaluate a cash payment. If you would not pay the full price in cash today, the BNPL framing is carrying you past a rational spending threshold. The MIT researchers found that card payment produced twice the spending of cash for identical purchases. The financial industry found the same research, studied it carefully, and spent the next 2 decades systematically engineering every remaining friction point out of the payment experience. The spending gap did not grow by accident. It grew by design. Now you have the same science they used to build the system, and the specific applications that put it to work in your favor rather than theirs. Share this with one person who has never understood why they always seem to spend more than they planned. And if you want to keep understanding the behavioral science built into the financial systems around you, subscribe to Hidden Truth Files. Hidden no more.